this centerless awareness. Recognize this deep stillness. That holds everything. That remains pure, untouched. Prior to the expressions of the body, prior to thoughts and experiences. Being itself. And in this deep allowing of the moment, you recognize the most subtle tendencies. When the mind becomes like a still pond. That recognizes the smallest ripple. Whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes, move your body. I often get the question, what kind of sadhana should I do? What should I practice? And even the question, what is sadhana? What are the boundaries of your sadhana? When does it begin? Does it end when the bell chimes? And it's easy to answer the basics. It's good to sit. Sit half an hour in the morning. And if you're comfortable with that, also sit half an hour in the evening. Good. Simple. If your mind is occupied with stuff, concentrate on your breath. When the mind settles, stay with the stillness. Do inquiry. Easy. Such an easy sadhana. 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
And you know it. It takes only 30 seconds to tell. You were hoping for a 30-second sadhana. Is that what you're saying now?
No, but you said that, bro.
But the edges of your sadhana, after a while, starts to get soft. And when you get up from your meditation pillow and start to move about in your life, you notice that it is the same. There is no difference. And suddenly meditation comes in your life when you're not ready. You might even say, I didn't ask for this now. This is now not a good time. It's not appropriate. But it just comes. Because what you open up to in meditation is not the doing. It is being. So it won't behave like an action. Because we think of actions as something that we can take out, do for a while, and then we're done. But your nature is not like that. Your true nature is just being. So it won't go. It won't follow your schedule. And it starts to get difficult when someone asks you, tell me about your sadhana. How much of it do you do? And you might feel, but I don't feel like I'm doing my sadhana. It's just happening. It's happening if I want to do it or not. Because what I come back to is the recognition of being. If I'm cooking, if I'm on my way, on my bike to work, whatever. And I also often get asked, what is the most important quality for a meditator? And I think that many people expect me to say, you have to work hard, discipline, consistency. But the greatest thing in meditation is sincerity, by far. To come to observing and to recognize yourself in the moments where you usually wouldn't, in the least spiritual moments. To check in when you're in a conversation with someone, when you're in disagreement with someone. These are moments that most people don't find spiritual at all. And also for the one who is new to meditation, it's quite difficult to be aware there. There's usually so much identification in conversation. But if you get used to this, recognizing it, and the reason why so many traditions starts by you being silent, sitting on a meditation pillow, is because that is like perfect conditions for it. Even, I know that many people find that difficult, but from all the things that you can do, and all the things, the positions that you can hold in your life, that is like the easiest physical. Nothing is happening, you're closing your eyes, you're sitting still. But this is not the full extent of sadhana. The great sadhana is when it moves the boundaries of what sadhana is. And it will completely change your outlook on challenging things, for example, if you start to be with them. Because for most people, challenges are just something that you really try to avoid. So it feels like it's a big shift to do something else with it, to just be with it, to recognize it. And I understand that it feels overwhelming when you feel like a victim and you feel small, isolated, fearful, all these things. And that's where this sincerity comes into play. And you can say all the things about your life, that it's challenging, it's exhausting, all these things. But if it propels you to this, and there are so many strange mechanics that can happen. You can have someone close who resists your spiritual journey, who's completely against it, who points out time and time again that it's stupid, wasteful, all these things. But that can be your blessing, because it will show you your fire for it. they will say, give it up. And you have a sense, I can never, how can I give up this? And suddenly things become clear. I just want to take that as an example because we make so many assumptions what is good on the spiritual path and what is bad. And that you have many challenges does not at all mean that it is bad or it's hindering you. Maybe it is what propels you. Maybe that is what moves you forward. Something is. God's hand is pushing you, helping you. And just the acceptance of this weird experience that we're having. And the complexity of it, that is almost impossible complex sometimes. And that the egoic mind makes this simple black and white version of things. Makes also the more you stay as you are, you have to recognize that it has to do with being comfortable in uncertainty. You don't know what this is and what the experience will bring. What is good, what is bad. But when you relax into that, there is a deep intuitive sense that is much easier to recognize. You don't know why it's there, why it's pulling in certain directions, but you start to know to listen to it. It's not judgmental like the ego. It just is more like a stream towards something. And it has very, very deep intelligence. And when you start to see it, you start to have trust in your heart. What some would refer to as faith. And there can be a lot of movement in it. Sometimes it makes the body active, carrying out actions. But the deep undercurrent is always this longing. Longing for awareness to know itself. The longing for truth, whatever you want to call it. The longing to feel whole. And when it comes to sadhana, our practice sounds like a doing, like something we take on, right? But this intuitive stream, Dhamma, or whatever you would like to call it, the laws of being, perhaps, to just go with that instead of going with the ego. Is that a doing? is it really an action? What is prior? Do you understand why that question is relevant? What comes first? I remember early when I first heard about beingness. And I recognized my own conditioning of the idea of who I was. The idea that I had mental tendencies and physical tendencies. And it's like a brain of mental thoughts inside a body. And that is who I am. And when I heard that there is something that is aware of all that, and that has to be prior to those things, it felt almost psychedelic. But I also recognized right away that that is how I see myself, and not how this idea that I had imposed on myself is. And this is when you talk about how spiritual teachings manifest in the body, is just that recognition. That it's just like you had it wrong, and intuitively you know what is right.
Because it's expensive also.
Yes. It's expansive. And there is no limit. The intuitive sense has no limitations. Like ideas have limitations. Like as soon as you departmentalize something, categorize it, it starts to become within the boundaries of something, of an idea. And this is the problem with words when it comes to spirituality, because they're very much made from this they're made of those qualities of limiting something so that you can understand it. But how do you talk about the limitless with the words that we use to limit things? It becomes ridiculous in a sense. It becomes impossible. And it's also the beauty of beingness. And it shows us very, very clear that words have a limitation. Please take the mic.
When you say the intuitive sense, do you mean beingness or kind of intuition towards beingness or something like that?
Yes, I talk about intuition because beingness can be so easily interpreted that it's very passive. But in the intuitive sense, people are more, it's easier to understand that there can be a direction in it, that it still has it's a movement.
A pull towards it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and usually when you long for things that seem irrational and they might seem also scary, it can be this intuitive sense that is pulling.
And then if we listen to that, we can see what happens.
Yes. And it can long for when you start to recognize beingness, it can start to long for that. For the intuitive sense, it becomes very apparent that, okay, it's this direction. It's self-confrontation. I just want to be with what is. I want to be in the edge of my understanding. I want to be super truthful so I can understand the edge of my understanding. All these things comes from the intuitive sense. And the opposite is true when it comes to the ego, because it wants to claim things. It wants to become something. It wants to become better. And this is also very common, that it comes into our sadhana, our spiritual practice, that we try to become something so that you will be a better meditator. I just have to become more stable, more happy, more at peace, more this, more that. You need something to be more complete, to be able to really practice your sadhana. Then I can really go into meditation, you will say. But that is not true. That is just ideas that limit you.
Okay. But if I stay at the edge of my knowledge, and I have some idea, but I don't know if it's intuition. And then, but if I'm like really aware and just try it out, and I stay at the edge of my knowledge, and try that thing or whatever it is, then like, I mean, that seems like a good way to try it, right? I mean, do you understand what I mean? Because sometimes I think there is some things that comes to me, like there is some desire to live in a different way, or just try something, change something in the relative that feels right, but I don't know if it's intuition or if it's a mix of them, but it's
usually very, the intuitive sense, if you allow it, is very, very obvious. I can take an example. I remember one of the first Vedanta retreats I went to, and there was a part of me that just really started to have this deep longing for the stillness of being at a retreat again. And then the mind says, that is terrible. Your knees hurt so much last time. You're just going to sit for hours, this and this, all the bad things. You have to travel, you have to do all the things that could be seen as negative with it. But the intuitive sense had it didn't counter argue. It just said, yes. You understand? Not with words really, but it's just, there's a deep longing for it, whatever it takes. So to the intellect and to the egoic mind, it seems stupid. It seems naive. It seems childish. Because the longing of it is just very simple.
So to live more ascetic, for example, would that also be? Would that be something from the ego?
I cannot answer it like that, because you can have an idea of that is a better meditator to do that. Do you understand?
Yeah.
It's so easy to just accumulate ideas on how you should be perceived as a meditator, how you should be in the world.
Yes.
And this could just be one of your ideas that you go for.
And that's why I asked if I stay at the edge of my knowledge and try things out, then I can see if it's something.
It will show you. Life will show you. But all these things that are your ideas that you're going with are obscuring that. You understand? All your expectations, all your fantasies about how a meditator should live whatever it is.
But
They obscure this.
how
they-
about yeah?
They're in the way for you.
But how about your longing to go to another Vedanta retreat? There was no thoughts in that.
It was not really an argument. Do you understand? It didn't argue to go. It just longed.
Yeah.
But I know that you know this
Yeah.
this pull, because you feel it when you sing in your devotional singing. You have told me. I know that you sense that. But that is it's not rational, right? No. And when you tell people, they can be like, you're crazy, you're a bit crazy doing that. Or you understand? Because it doesn't sound like a thing, but it is just your longing for it. And you have a sense of mergence in that. And it feels, there is the qualities of beingness is in it somehow. There is this deep sense of completion in it. There is a sense of peace in it. Stillness is there. All these things are there. But to most people, the intuitive sense is there, but the mind is just obscuring it so much through all the ideas of what my life should be. And even for most meditators, I just want to say that, because many people think that as soon as you go on some kind of spiritual path, you're free of those kind of hurdles. But you're absolutely not. It usually just comes with. And now you have another idea of how do I live a spiritual life? How am I the best meditator?
Yeah. No. I get that, and or I think so at least, and yeah. But I just feel like somehow in the way I relate to or how I live, there seems like there is some disconnection or something that I'm not really like taking care of, or something with integrity, and then then there is like symptoms, and then
it creates a lot of karma.
Yeah, and then I do something else that kind of because it becomes because it becomes a bit hard to be with yourself and be sensitive, and then you just have to like numb that, and or don't have to, but that's how I do it. That's how I do it,
yes.
and that's probably why I do have that longing for ascetic, and it's not. I think it's just being more in touch with my intuition, and just listening to that and being more sensitive to that, in whatever form that takes. And there was something else I was thinking about. Why did I forget that? Yeah.
You can come back when it comes. Okay. And I think that many people long for an idea also, that they will find everything so clear and that they will know exactly what to do. That the clarity of meditation is like will give you the complete map somehow. But the clarity that comes from meditation does not give you a map. It just gives you the present moment. And the acceptance of seeing what happens. And that feels like full clarity. Even though it is a complete surprise. Because the sense of non-clarity is the idea that there is a full picture somehow. And that it is completely revealed. Right? But it has nothing to do with that. Because the sense of that comes from the identification and the idea of control. And now I can see my whole life and how it unfolds somehow. That is the idea of the clarity. but there is not a person moving in time like most people have an idea of. So life just unfolds. This experience just unfolds. And that is actually beautiful. But I understand to many people that that sounds horrendous. Because it means that you cannot lean on time. Do you understand? And so many people lean on the idea of time because hope is there, stability of where I come from and what I have been, what I am, is there in the idea of time. Without time, there's only being. And to the idea of the person, that sounds very limiting when it's actually all there is. And if you feel that you cannot wrap your head around that, that is correct. That is not what it is. Because it's also just experiencing. It's not an intellectual exercise with an answer. I'm just saying these super obvious things so that there is no confusion about it.
But it is important to make the like sometimes we can intellectually understand things and like, okay, yeah, that seems stupid, like I shouldn't try that. Like even if you see like someone says like that doesn't work, like sometimes it's good to try and see for yourself that that was idiotic. I mean, you know what I mean, right?
I think that many people are afraid of trying something that they feel is a bit stupid, and see if it happens, if it works. Because you can also have an idea that I am smart, I know that this doesn't work, but you don't have the experience of it yet. So you're still hesitant. There's still a little bit about belief that it might be something in that.
Exactly.
And in those cases, it can be good to really try. And it just like we could try talk about sitting a lot, for example, and just pushing your sadhana with ambition. If you have a sense that there is something in that needs to be proven, or you're not sure really what that would do, to exhaust that can be great. And you really push yourself and you notice, oh, this just makes my mind much more egoic and much more, but you see it as an experience. Not, for some people it just clicks when they hear it. But for many people it's very good to have the experience. To try, if you have a weekend by yourself, and if you have that sense, really try. Sit as many hours as you can. See what it does. Does it really work to push? And is there something that is good with that? Is there something that is bad? And not be afraid of just trying it, even though it can seem stupid because you sort of know the answer.
But what about sitting many hours without ambition?
Yes, but usually the idea comes from that, because there's also the possibility that you sit many hours without any ambition, but then you're very much at peace. then you don't mind. But most people are not there.
But and if we sit and ambition or pain comes, but we just sit through it, can we do that without ambition and just inquire?
You find out.
Yeah. Yeah. How about if we do other exercises though? Like let's say we do some kind of yoga, and it is easier to meditate after that. Does that doesn't conclude that? I mean, maybe that was just for that time being, or does it say something about it? Or
Yes, but as soon as you don't draw the conclusion that I have to do my sadhana like this forever.
Okay.
It's very easy to be like that, especially if you feel like I have a continuing sadhana, I do my practice every day, I have great consistency in it, and you don't want to change anything. But at a certain point, perhaps even if you feel restless now and the yoga exercises help you to calm down and to sit, maybe there will come some point where that is not needed. You will just feel fine by just sitting. Then do you have to do the exercises?
Yeah.
You understand?
And if it doesn't help, then I should
Or
also
it
see that.
doesn't do any different.
Yeah.
It's not
I mean, then it's good to feel in, like,
Yes.
okay, this kind of yoga does help, and the other one doesn't, and
yes, no, and
then I can just try.
allow the sadhana to change.
Yeah.
But also, especially be open to the intuitive sense in it.
Exactly.
It will tell you.
Because at first it sounded like you said, like I do this thing and I have kind of this structure. That sounded almost a bit mechanical to me.
Yes, and I just want to say it's very easy that it becomes very mechanical and it becomes very dry.
But it's not to stay with the beingness. It's nothing if in that is mechanical.
No.
No, exactly. And that is the loftiest sadhana, right?
That is the
Loftiest. That's like the most highest is probably not a good word, but
yes,
I mean that's
I Yes, but of course the sadhana is in. If we look at the depth of what it is just being as you are. So if we're gonna go all the way, you could say that there is no sadhana. There's no difference between meditation and the meditator. Because it's all the same. What is sadhana to the one who is always as they are? There is no sadhana. That is ridiculous to talk about. If you're just with the present moment and in acceptance of it, that is complete sadhana. Done. Sadhana is only needed if there is a sense of individuality. But then you also have to understand that there is a dual nature to sadhana. Because it springs from the idea of someone going somewhere. So this is the limits of doing. And that is why the practice and the practitioner in the end finds out that they are the same. There is no difference. But I know that some Advaita Vedanta people think that that is the only thing that you should talk about. But that is not a way into it. Because when you feel that you are separate, you have to do a sadhana from that standpoint until you see something else. And if you're not very fearful or rigid with your sadhana, if you try certain things, if you listen to the intuitive sense and it can say the strangest things that you should try. It has a very broad creative approach to what the mind can be and how it can approach this. It can say strange things like, just completely give up. And you feel the warmth in that giving up. And it's like, what is it? Am I giving up my sadhana? It feels strange. And then everything feels like shaky and strange. And then there is a deep sense of giving up. And then there is so much more peace. And you just, okay. And it won't be in the ways that you think. Many people think that they start to practice and then they get they get more and more pumped up when it comes to motivation and consistency. And it doesn't have to be like that at all. You can start to feel like I'm losing interest in meditation and spirituality. Because you start to really lean into beingness and you understand that the ideas that you have are hindering you. So it feels like you're leaving the thing that you're actually going deeper into. All these things are possible to experience when you practice. And it feels like I'm not going in the right direction, the mind can say. I'm moving away from it. When you're actually really leaning into it. Because it is to the ego, it's not intuitive. It thinks in ideas of a progressing path, of coming from point A to point B. All these ideas are there. And when they are not filled, it can feel confusing, it can feel strange. It feels like, what is my practice? What is this? What is spirituality? What is meditation? And all these questions are also very good questions. Because we usually are drawn towards just following the ideas that we have of who we are and how we make that one more complete.
I mean, could we also I ask so many questions, but could we also ask this question inward, like I know we can, but I mean, I could find the answer inward. I don't have to ask you necessarily, right?
Yes, it's great if you ask inward, because there's also a teacher within you that knows.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
We all have this potential of wisdom, and that voice is not just an external voice, but as Ramana so beautifully put it, when the external teacher is needed, the external teacher will appear. So it's very easy in that sense. Because if you follow the intuitive sense, it will just take you to listen to the teacher that you need in that moment. And the strangest things can happen there as well. You go to a teacher that you don't like, and you only go there once. But that teacher shows you something really profound. Still, it is so... Life is so strange. It is not what you think. I can't... It's very much a mystery. It's not what you think it is. And that is a very good thing to have with you. And the sense of not knowing. And in our culture, it's so easy to feel like not knowing is something to almost be ashamed of. And when it comes to meditation, it's one of the most beautiful qualities. And that also feels like a great contradiction to most people. Because it's just the acceptance of the now is the acceptance of not knowing. Because as soon as you know, you say, I know who I am, I know where I'm going, I know this, I know that. Then everything is locked and you have to suffer all those ideas, all those expectations. When it's open, it can just move, it can change, it can happen as it happens. But most people are not very comfortable with being because of that. They want something to hold on to. They want a continuously sense of an idea of a person to hold on to that is not changing, that feels like stability, because we all look for stability. But the only real stability is beingness itself. Everything else will let you down when it comes to stability. No phenomena is stable. And you can create a very, very, on the surface, very stable life. You can have a very stable partner, a very stable home, everything can seem very stable, but it's just still phenomena that come and go. And you will feel like you have to protect it all the time if your stability is in that. If your stability is externalized, then you will feel like you have to protect everything. If the stability comes from beingness, you just are. It is so beautiful. It is so beautiful that it is like that. Because it means that it is the same for everyone.
But at least my memory about when I believed more in my identity. I mean, I'm not saying that it was that great, but I could feel more stability, but I didn't have the beautiful moments of awareness that I have now, at least that sometimes. But this confusion, this in between, is very painful for me, at least. Because it feels like I don't know anything anymore. Like I don't know. And that is, that's not such a pleasant experience.
No, for the egoic mind, it's terrible. It's death and pain, confusion. It is not that. That's why most people are not deeply interested in spirituality. You said to me today, Ola, I wonder why there's not more people coming. And I said, I'm amazed that people are coming. Because, as I said to you, they could be home eating tacos and watching Netflix. Because, and I think that's why sometimes teachers feel like they just want to sugarcoat spirituality, because that will draw more people to it. But I don't feel like I want to do that, because I just want to show you what it is. I think it's much more helpful. And it's spirituality in itself is such a beautiful thing. Just the exploration of it, and when you come beyond the first hurdles, you start to feel like there is momentum in it, and it automatically just moves in your life. And you might be scared of it, you might be trembling sometimes, you feel it's overwhelming, it's too much. All these things can happen. But what it opens up to is the possibility of starting to accepting this moment as it is and living a life from that. And the beauty and the quality of life that comes with that is wondrous. Before it came into my life, there was so much darkness. There were so many ideas of who I was and where I was going. And when the deep acceptance started to come, I could just cry of the beauty of being in the forest. I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the experience itself. And that just happens when there is nothing between you and the experience, when it's allowed to be the same. When the trees no longer are out there, they're in here. And it opens up, if that is just opened up to, it starts to become this longing for awareness just to know itself. Yes, you have a question?
I have a question because, well, I have many questions. I'm sitting here with many waves of, and with the most of it, I have the sense that I just need to sit. I need to be with it by myself. But when you say this about crying in the forest, I get curious and I make the story that we have had very different paths through life. I am very, I can cry at anything. I feel like I have nothing, but it can be very reactive. It feels like it can be very, very pure and away from the ego, like this experience of beauty or rage. Like I love it also. But I just got curious for if you would speak. I make the story that you were someone who could not so easily cry, or did not have so much openness and flow in that way, and then that opened to you and that became beautiful, and this is spiritual. And I'm curious if you would speak to that somehow.
Okay. Yes, but and I want to say that what you're saying is true, that it is from the standpoint of how the expression is in that person and what they have come from. But just my disposition when I was a child, I cried very, very easily. I was very sensitive to things and I couldn't handle the world very well at all. And I think much of that confusion about sensing things and sensing people's intuition. They could be smiling, really nice to you, but you had a sense that they were not having a good intention. You could sense that so easily. These kind of things confused me a lot as a child. But crying was never an issue for me. It was not something I came over. I just at some point started to accept crying, and it felt like I understood the purpose of it, because it's also that so many people associate crying with there being something wrong. If you cry, they try to fix you. They want to stop you from crying. It's like the sense that many parents have with really small children also. Before they can talk, you just want to stop the crying. You want to feed them or make the right decisions so that they don't cry. So I understand where that comes from. But for many adults, when they cry, they just release their emotions. There's the tension that is built up through the ego usually, or just the overwhelming, like I was talking about, the overwhelming beauty of life just hits, and it's just this that you just cry from the love of that beauty. So it can have so many expressions, but what can happen also when you understand that the crying is a release for you is that you think that you're evolving somehow spiritually, but the only thing that happens is that the egoic tendencies tense up, and you have to release them. The egoic tendencies tense up, so you're just in a loop of this, but you have this story that you're evolving spiritually. That is also very common.
That is, I don't feel like sometimes the crying can be a release when it feels like there's presence and it's like riding a wave, or feels like something can move. But most of the time I recognize what you say about this loop of I'm just contraction and in stress in my daily life, or burnout feelings, and then eventually, okay, I can cry, but it just brings me back to zero and then starts again. This kind of feeling, and I make a story that I just want to stop being overwhelmed, and maybe, so
And I just want to be clear that many people that come to spirituality are very sensitive. That is such a common trait, because for them it is overwhelming to just be in society doing normal things. and as I talked about, when I talk about my upbringing and some people that hear my story, and as a child, when I was 11, I thought of killing myself. I was really struggling with depression and anxiety as a child, but it really propelled me towards spirituality. I started to ask questions very, very early. What is the point of life? Why are adults happy? How do you live a happy life? All these things. Is it going to be solved by this? People say so, but what is the actuality of it? And I think all those things can seem very dark in the moment, but to me, I just see them as blessings. There's so much beauty in that. From that darkness, just something that just pushed towards light. And I sense that is in all people. And you can ignore it, and you can have all your very strong convictions about what your life should be and this, but that will just interfere with the pure being. And as soon as you see that, you won't fight it anymore. And there are so many ideas. You can follow all the rules of society and how to be a prosperous citizen and how to be a good person, and all the ideas that society can have of what a good citizen is. And you fulfill everything, and you come to the conclusion there's no happiness in this. I have lived my life perfectly, but there is no happiness in it. And that is brutal. And that is what many people experience at some point. So, however ambitious or striving or fulfilling your dreams you do, you come to the point where you start to notice that beingness is more important than anything. Being with the present moment as it is determines the quality of your life. Yes.
Could you speak a bit about the difference, if any, I can relate to experiences of desiring to die. And I'm curious about the difference between, I heard you say just now, the most important thing is being in the being space, and I heard a voice in my head that questioned it and was like, is it more important than dying? Is it more important than just not existing?
And
And
the,
yeah.
yes, I can talk about this, and I've talked to many people in my life with ideas of killing themselves or not being able to stand the experience anymore, and it's too overwhelming.
Yeah, just something around wanting it to stop.
Yes,
I
yes,
know
and
such a deep longing to just move really far north with nothing, and a sense underneath that maybe there will be something.
yes,
And
and
the desire for it to stop, and
it is a longing for the ego to die.
yeah.
That is all longing for death, is that. Because when there is just pure being and you stay in the moment and you feel at peace with the moment as it is, there is no thought of, oh, I want to be somewhere else. Who is going to be somewhere else? You won't even have that concept. So all ideas of death are symbolic, but we take them as this body has to die. And
Yeah.
yes, and I know that you all know that you have been teenagers or you know teenagers, and they are at some point is like, I can't take this anymore, I just want to die. I hate you. Whatever happens in that. That is also the longing for the symbolic death, because the ego starts to be it starts to be more solid, and it feels so heavy to go from this playful child's mind into this solidity and the grown-up stories of the ego. So when you go through that, you suffer that. And many teenagers, and I talk to my friends now that have teenage children, that they start to be nostalgic about their childhood because they feel like it's slipping away from them, that this solidifying of the ego is happening, and it's not nice. And you still have no real, you don't really have the freedom of an adult, which in the young teenage mind is that you can do whatever you want. So they feel trapped by the authority of the parents, and they have this longing for this freedom, and they feel trapped by the egoic mind. So the world is so small, and I think that there's also very little sometimes understanding from the parents' point of view of this, how trapped a teenager is in that phase.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's also a thing that can feel quite strange when you understand that this longing for death is symbolic. And there can be experiences like in meditation that is very beautiful and very free. And a voice says, I don't care if I would die right now. And that can sound very dark. But that is just such a call from freedom, because it says, if the ego goes, it's fine. But to the identified self, it feels like a death. It feels like something is leaving. And this is a recurring theme if you practice any form of serious spirituality, you will face this feeling. It's very common that you feel very, very isolated, no one understands you, it feels like you're going crazy, or that you're straight up going to die from it. At some point, some of those fears will rear its head for most people. But it's not dangerous, it just feels big. And if you're not used to openly talking about things like this, it can be so big, and all your conditioning of how scared you should be of all these kind of thoughts become very, very big. But if we have conversations like this, and it just becomes normal, and it's just out there, then it feels like, okay, this can happen also. And that allows for the deep acceptance of this moment to be as it is. Because the biggest obstacle in acceptance is to accept dying. That is the core of the egoic mind. Everything, all other fears spring from the fear of death. It's so ultimate. Everything is just a shootout from that. Some version, lighter version of the fear of death. All the fears. And the mind is just telling us things. It just goes on. It's just trying to push the buttons that work. And if you start to realize that, it's also, I don't have to go with the mind. I don't have to do what the mind says, even if it speaks with my voice. It's just another thing that it's trying to do. And you will notice in moments, if you stay as awareness, you will be very, very aware of certain moments where you just notice that the mind suggests something. You do that, it turned out badly, it says, you shouldn't have done that. But it just plays you completely. And that just shows that it just wants to stay relevant. It's almost saying, I just want your attention, but it's just trying different ways to do that, to stay relevant. And if you stay with beingness itself, if you just stay in this moment as it is, not touching the thoughts, you will see that it panics completely. And it will try the things that will trigger you the most. It becomes desperate. And it just, the more you look at it, the more it will reveal its mechanics of how it works. Most people are so invested in their egoic mind. They have so many ways of like going with it, trying to stay friends with it, all these things. So they just contort themselves completely just to stay on the right side of their inner voice. You don't have to do that. And maybe I'm the first person who ever tells you that. But I think that this is a great thing to hear. Because that just weakens the grip of the egoic mind. And I also just want to point out that it is, I get the question sometimes if their children can jump past the stage of creating these Can they just be children and then just go into some freedom? But it seems like we need to go through the crystallization of the ego for it to be a burden, to then be interested in shaking it off. That seemed to be unavoidable.
So is that what it is to be human? So, yeah, wondering, how would you describe being human then? Is that the human experience?
I think if we were going to talk about a purpose, I think finding out what you are is the purpose. And that sounds like you're going to find a core of something that you are. But it will just show that there is nothing. There is just beingness. But since we have the experience of not being free, it beautifully puts us on a path towards freedom. It's not that you start to hear about spirituality and then get the idea, oh, I might not be free. You come to spirituality because you long for freedom, right? And usually because you're tired of the egoic mind. Because if you're not really tired of the egoic mind and all its games, you might have the idea that you can better it. And then you're usually into personal development. So you have to come to the point where it feels like, okay, I can better the mind, but it doesn't really make me free. There is still something about the ego that seems to just always want to continue and just stay relevant and just want to grab my attention with the next thing and next thing and next thing. Did I answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, because we seem to be like the only animal, on the planet who has this...
who goes on spiritual quests.
Yeah, exactly. Who has that development, like what you were speaking about, the self, and that we have to go into the self,
Yes.
but to actually break out of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It also has to do with the complexity, of course, of that we can conceptualize things that are very, very on a very, very extreme level. Most people can have very, very large concepts, especially of who they are. And I think that many of the animals are free of those kind of ideas. That I'm not adequate for society in this way. They don't think in terms of that. But observing animals can also be good, because you notice that they can suffer in many ways, and they can suffer their ideas that they're going to be fed and not being fed. All these things you can see in them that it happens, but it's just on a much more rudimentary level, and the complexity of the ego that the human can create is unmatched, I think, by most animals.
But there have been animals that have been on spiritual quest.
Yes, that are drawn to spirituality. And I think that is also quite common. But that is just intuitive beingness being reflected in someone. And you talk about Ramana Maharshi and the cow. Yeah. There are other examples. And this can of course happen. And usually if your mind is very quiet, animals will be drawn to you, because they also can be very sensitive to your agenda. They don't feel it like they know exactly what you're up to, but if you want something with them, then you might want to eat them, or so it's not really safe. But if there is someone that is just with beingness, that can be reflected, and that doesn't need words. So I think that is why many animals are just naturally drawn to. And you're thinking about the panther and Swami, all these examples. Yes.
There are some of them.
Yes.
And there are, but there have been also. But I mean, maybe that's very few. Then, like when you said, like people have to go through the crystallization of the ego, and
yes,
I mean, there have been.
Yes,
also,
but and I just want to say, when we talk about things like that, there can always be an example of someone, and then you will say, yes, but Ananda Mayama, she never really got through that process. Okay, yes, there will always be things like that. So, but we have to be able to talk about things. And sometimes in general terms. It cannot be so rigid. Any more questions today? Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Shiva Om Namah. may everyone find peace. In resting in their natural awareness. In the recognition of this moment and the allowance of it to be as it is.